Okay guys, so today we're going to look at loops, or in this video we're going to look at loops and two kinds of loops, the for loop and the while loop. Now the for loop iterates over a sequence, over a list of items, so repeats a condition over a list of items, while the while loop repeats a process or a statement while a condition is true. Okay, so both of them are repetitive in nature. Let's try for the for loop. So just like the example I gave in the previous video, that for balls in a basket, paint them a certain color. So as long as there are balls in the basket, for each ball, pick and paint. Each ball, pick and paint. That's what a for loop will do. Okay, so let's do a simple list of numbers. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The for loop is easily saying that for the for loop you need what you're going to call an iterator, which is that particular item you're going to use to go through each item in the loop. Think of it this way: in my basket of balls, I need to pick a ball each time. Pick a ball each time. So while I have balls, every time I have picked, what I have in my hand is a ball. So my for loop statement will be like, for each ball in balls, do this. So ball is our iterator, while balls is our list of items. So every loop, for loop, needs an iterator, and the list is iterating through, and then the function is to perform. So if I say for number in numbers, go ahead and print number multiplied by 2. So pick the first number, which is 1, multiplied by 2. Pick the second number, which is 2, multiplied by 2, and so on and so forth. Is that making some sense to us? So simply that's what the for loop does. Iterates through a list of items and performs a function or a command each time you do that. If I have once again, let's say numbers, and I use the range function to say 20. Now this is going to create a range of numbers for me, and if I say for n in numbers, so now I'm calling my range, I'm calling my list, my iterator n. For n in numbers, go ahead and print n raised to the power of 2. What I've done now is the square of every value from 0 to 19, because that's what range has done for me. 0 square is 0, 1 square is 1, 2 square is 4, and so on and so forth. Of course, you could go ahead to use an if statement in a for loop. So if I say for n in numbers, and I'll say if n when divided by 2 holds no remainder, go ahead and print n squared. So this is going through the list and check if n is an even number, because I explained to us what the modulator operator is. It is what is the remainder when these two values are divided. So if any number divided by 2 gives you 0 remainder, it's an even number, right? So we are now saying for each number in numbers, if n is an even number, give us the square of that number. So it went through the list and then gave us the square of all the even numbers between 0 and 20. Make sense? Right. So that's how the for loop works. A while loop, in its own case, works by saying, as long as this condition is true, go ahead and do this. But I must warn you, when working with a while loop, you have to be careful of what is called an infinite loop. Because if you put a condition that will always be true, your while loop is always going to keep running and running and running and running away from you, which is going to be bad for your device. So always make sure that you have written your code in such a way that it's not going to form an infinite loop. Let's have a go. So if I declare that a particular value I is, or let's say n is equal to 5, and I now say while n is greater than 0, this is going to create an infinite loop. And the reason because n is equal to 5, so it's going to be always true. So if I do instead n while n is equal to 0, n is equal to 0 while n is less than 5, and I go ahead and tell it print print n, okay, but then the while statement needs its own form of iterator, but its iterator is not to repeat over a list of items, is to change this man to make sure this guy is increasing. So we call it the increment. I'll call it the increment value. So I'm going to say let n be increasing by 1. Let n be increasing by 1. That's what n plus equal to 1 means. If you want to say let n be decreasing by 1, then you do n minus equal to 1. If I execute this, it starts initially n is equal to 0, so it prints n, and then n increases by 1, so it prints, it goes and check, is n still less than 5, which is true, so it prints it, which is 1, then it comes, it increases to 2, good, it comes to check, is n still less than 5, which is true, it prints 2, then comes, increases to 3, until we get to 4. That's n equal to 4, so it comes, it increases by 1, which is now 5, and it goes back again to check, is 5 less than 5, which is not true, and the process terminates. So the while statement will keep on running as long as the condition given to it is true. Now, the while statement also works with, or our control statements also work with, certain other keywords that are necessary, which are the break and the continue. So the break and the continue is, break is if a particular condition is met, stop iterating once this condition is met. While continue is if this particular condition is met, please skip this condition and go ahead and keep doing what you want to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and build something and see. So let's say while n is equal to 0, and I go ahead and say okay, n is equal to 0. Now say while n is less than 10. Okay, now take note, we want to tell it print n. So if it checks n is less than 10, go ahead and print n. But now I want to tell it to check if n is equal to 5, then I'm going to tell it break. So while you're checking, while n is increasing, which we've not added, if it finds that n is equal to 5, please break. Otherwise, go ahead and print n. Now we want to add our iterator. Okay, so look what happens. N equal to 5. The moment it saw that n was equal to 5, it broke, so the process became terminated at that point. So break will stop the while loop the moment it finds. So whether for a while, whether for an if loop. So even if I do n equal to range let's say 10, and then I say for n, for I in n, okay, I want you to print the square of each I, okay. Also, there's no need for this. Print the square of each I. So if it finds that I is equal to 5, break. So it was doing 0, 1, it was repeating the same instruction for each value in n, but the moment it saw that I is now equal to 5, it broke. Does that make sense? Okay. Similarly, like I've mentioned earlier, the continue is going to skip that particular command. Now we are saying keep increasing while this is this. So the moment it found that n is equal to 5, it continues. So obviously there's something wrong with how I've written this. Okay, it's still running. I may have created an infinite loop here. Now this is the danger of it. I'm going to go ahead and interrupt my kernel, and then let's find out what the problem is with my block of code. We said while n is less than 10, if you find that n is equal to 5, continue. So it's going to skip 5 and then go ahead and continue printing until this. So okay, I found out the issue. Alright, so the issue is it's going to continue, which means it's not going to skip. Let's go back and see what I mean. So when it's continue, it means that it's not going to increase to n to 6, because continue means skip the rest of the block of code, go back up and continue rechecking again. So it means that n is going to be continually 5, right? Remember we said that continue is when once this condition is true, skip the rest of the block of code and go to the next value. So the next value is going to be 6, supposed to be 6. However, the place where we put our increment is not going to be able to get there. So n is always going to be 5. N is always going to be 5, right? But if I bring this increment here, then run this, it worked fine. So from n plus equal to 1, which is now 1, 0 plus 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. When it got to where n is equal to 5, it continued. It didn't go ahead to print n, because continue is exit my loop and go and start, right? So it came up here again, which is when n is still equal to 5. It's 5 less than 10 is true. It came down and increased to 6, and then it would come to check this condition, which was not true, and go ahead to print 6. Okay, so this is how we use our for loop and our while loop, which are loop statements. You could have nested loops with ifs, with fors, and so on and so forth. But these are some of the fundamentals that you definitely need to be able to work comfortably in pandas, in Python for data analysis. There's so much more we are going to learn, and from the next part of this series, we are now going to go chiefly into working with tables, CSVs, Excels, which is in the form of data frames with Python. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good time, guys.